Hey mama, are you a multi-passionate mom who is juggling all the things, nursing a baby, battling laundry, trying to keep it together and keep a spicy marriage, and feeling like you're feeling all of it? What's up? I'm Ashley Carroll. I'm here to hold your hand through this process because I believe when you're ready to take control of your life, beat the limiting excuses, step into your own power, you can not only survive, but you can thrive. But you're gonna have to show up for yourself. It's time for me to tough love your way through prioritization, taking self-care seriously, getting rid of excuses, reconnecting with your family, kids, and spouse, and quite honestly, learning to love the chaos because the glory is in the journey. It's in the mess. In this podcast, you will find balance for busy mamas, navigating mom guilt, time management strategies, and everything in between with no fluff and lots of fun. Let's go. Hey friends, before we get into today's episode, I am doing something new and I'm so excited. I literally cannot even believe I'm doing this because I never thought I would, but I am going to offer a couple of mindset transformation strategy sessions with me, like me and you together, one-on-one. We're going to do this. If you are a mom sitting in a space of excuses, if you're sitting in a space of feeling like you're not enough, wondering why you can't seem to get your life together, your communication is off point with your spouse, or you're feeling like hot mess express when it comes to motherhood and you just feel like there's more for you, but you can't get over your own limiting beliefs, I'm here to slap you around, okay? Like, let me tell you, you guys know this. This is for you, my friend, if you are ready to bust through those limiting beliefs, like you're ready to hear the honest truth and do something about it, get over those excuses and start taking action, the really literal hard action to change who you are. I'm so excited. If this is for you, I want you to get in my DMs right now. DM me, DM me and email me at theashcarroll@gmail.com. So like the Ash, ASH, Carol, 2 R's, 2 L's @gmail.com. Book these because I only have a couple spots, like literally just a couple that I'm going to offer this month. So first come, first serve. It's time to transform your mindset from the inside out. Let's go. Hey guys, I'm super excited to have Beatrice Vargas here from the Grace Fueled Wife podcast. She's awesome, definitely my vibe kind of girl, and I really enjoy talking to her. Her podcast is predominantly about marriage, and this is one of those topics that I frequently jam on about here, and so I wanted to bring her on and kind of just talk about that and dive deeper into it, and she has some really good tips and perspective. And so Beatrice, I'm so glad that you're here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me on. This is really excited. And guys, you are so lucky because I'm so happy that I found you and this has all been great. I really enjoy listening to your podcast and I'm a fan of yours. So this is awesome.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that we've connected and you have patience for me and my non-sleeping infant as of right now. So
Mama's got to stick together, you know.
I know, gosh, it's so crazy. So before we hopped on this podcast, yesterday I had asked you a question to think about before we hopped on. And that question was, if you met a woman whose marriage is just, like meh, like, she's like, you're like, how are things? She's like, meh. And you sit her down and you tell her, like, look, you got to stop making excuses. And I asked you to fill in the blank of what you would say next, what you would tell her next. And that's kind of the jumping off point I want to take with this of like, when you think about, your friend or somebody you care about and you're sitting with them and, you can see yourself in their place, you once were there, what would you say to her? What would be your first, like, this has got to change?
I love this question when you pose it to me because it is one of the reasons why I started the podcast, because I ended up having this conversation so many times and I felt like the answer ended up being the same every single time. So what I would do first is when I'm sitting with her, I'd ask her questions about what, to kind of dig in deep. It's like, well, why is the marriage meh? Everybody has their own reasons. And a lot of times your own reasons are the same, our things that go on in our life are really not that different than what goes on in everybody else's life. And so the answer that I found that I kept giving over and over and over was, as much as we want to change our husband, as much as we wish he would do A, B, and C, we can't change him. We can maybe influence his behavior a little bit, but we can't actually change him. So because of that, the only thing that we can control is our own actions. So I would sit down and, after kind of talking to her, say, you have to take accountability for these things that you're doing in your own marriage that maybe you can change. And then once you change that, from there is when the growth and the change and the transformation starts to happen. So that was really the first thing, is taking accountability for what you can change in your own marriage. And then that's when the answers start to vary from person to person.
Yeah. When you first started taking responsibility for yourself in your marriage, did you verbally like have a conversation with your husband, or was it like a personal choice of like, I'm going to make this change because it needs to start with me first? And then like, what did you see, kind of like, what was the effect of that in your marriage?
When I recognized that I needed to make the change, my story in my marriage was also another reason for having started the podcast. My husband had walked out on me. And so we were in a place of separation, and we were in a place of just, I thought the marriage was over. And it wasn't until then that I recognized that I had to change something. And I started really to dig into what needed to change. So that was a catalyst for me starting the podcast, because I don't want other women to get to the point of separation to have to do that. And so, you know, God blessed us, and that worked out for us, and he redeemed my marriage. But so for me at the time, it was I have to change, because we were not together. And so, you know, in telling women, most of them that I speak to aren't even in the place of separation. They are still in a place where their husband's communicating, they're living in the same house, and maybe it's not as great as it used to be. Maybe a lot of times I find that, you know, your husband or your soulmate has now become your roommate, and you're just kind of doing life together because you have to. You talk because of the kids, because of whatever, but you're not so much connected. And that's the thing that I find most often. And that's the place that I was right before our separation. And so I feel like my mission is to help women not get to the separation if they don't have to, but really how to come from that place and then figure out, okay, what is it that I can do? What is it that I can change? Because it can start with you today. You know, if you want to have a conversation with your husband, you got to schedule it. You got to wait till he's in a good mood. You know, there's things that, but you changing what you want to do right now as you're listening, you can make the mindset shift to change that right now.
My question for you is, like, when you're in that space of like, you know, your husband walking out on you, and thank you for sharing that, because that's such a vulnerable share. And I think that you're so brave to, I mean, you do this on your podcast, you've shared your story, which so many women can relate to. And that's a whole nother episode of like how we need to just open up and be honest with each other. And then we wouldn't be so judgmental or fearful about what other people think, and we'd be able to seek help more frequently and more openly. But when you're in that place of, you know, your husband's walking out, or you're on the verge of, you know, separation or what have you, how do you decipher between like, you know, feeling like it's all on you to redeem the situation or to solve the situation, or that it's your fault and so you need to fix you? Because I feel like we can get those mixed up of, I need to work on me, but also like it's my fault, and so therefore I need to like change and do all the things. Like, how do we differentiate those?
Well, I think putting the blame on yourself isn't the answer, really, because there's two of us in a relationship. And if you're in a place of being disconnected from your husband, I would bet, I'm not a betting woman, but I would bet money that he's got some amount of culpability in that. And
some skin in the game.
So I would say to that woman, like, don't beat yourself up for it. Don't beat yourself up for being in this place, because no one gets married to end up in this place. It just kind of happens as life happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first thing. And then so once you kind of can get past that and get past the, oh, woe's me, this is all my fault. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just, wake up, and what can we do to start getting better? Because you know what? Even if, and in the worst case scenario, even if your marriage ends,
Mm-hmm.
those relationship skills, those communication skills, those all those skills that you're going to build, you're going to need to take with you into the rest of your life, whether it's into another relationship or just you might decide to never get married, but those skills are going to apply. So
Yeah.
start working on them now, I would say.
Yeah. You're reading my mind, because right then I was just thinking about, like, even if the worst case scenario happens, you are wherever you go. And so you probably need to do the work anyways. And you're going to be better off for it, whether it's this relationship or the next one. And I mean, obviously we all hope it's this, your current relationship, but, yeah, I mean, I think that to me was like one of the most eye-opening phrases of, like, you are wherever you go, of like, I can't, just, it's not going to be easier if I just hop to another relationship, because all of my baggage, all of my issues, all of the things, unresolved problems and traumas, like, I'm going to carry it over with me, and it's going to be the same thing. It's just going to have a different, a different mask on it. And so, yeah, I really like that you brought that up. That was a good point. And then another thing that I heard you say in an episode, a previous episode of yours, was, your marriage can still be thriving, even if it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think
That,
we get caught up in that.
yeah. That one was a tough one for me to record. And like, we were talking about yesterday, COVID time, as the time of
Yeah.
we're recording this, we're kind of still in quarantine or coming out of quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really hard time to be trying to create content around marriages. Like, it's a really hard time to try to be encouraging other women on marriages where you're just trying to like keep your own marriage sane.
Yeah.
And and in that particular episode was like, we had a fight. Okay, every couple has disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so upset with myself, like, oh my gosh, I should give everything up. And then I thought about it and it was like, it's okay, it was just a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came through it, and I started to apply the principles that I try to teach other women to do. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, within an hour, it was done. It was all over. It was like it never happened. And so I realized in that moment that, like, my this is going to be my life.
Mm-hmm.
My marriage is never going to be perfect, and I need to be okay with the fact that my marriage is not going to be, no one's marriage is ever, there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're both two imperfect humans who have come together. And so I need to be okay with the fact that, like, my marriage is not perfect, but I have learned a whole lot over the past 17 years we've been together, of like how to get out of that and how to weave in and out of those disagreements. And we can still have a really awesome marriage, even
Yeah.
when we fight sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can totally relate to that, because I get it all up in my mind about that as well when we have an argument and it seems like the world is falling apart, or I realize that it's the same argument that we've had over and over. And so I feel like I'm failing. But I did an episode a while ago that, I did based off, same thing of, like, I was struggling through something and I was like, we got to talk about this, after I saw perspective from it and came out of it from the other side. And it was that your marriage is not failing because you're fighting. Your
Mm.
marriage, your marriage is a marriage. Like like you said, you're two people with baggage. You got to work it out. And also you're still growing. Like
Mm-hmm.
if we weren't fighting, like, I don't know a relationship that can, grow without some sort of conflict or struggle. And so I can't imagine, like, it's great to envision this, running through a field of sunflowers, holding hands all the time, and like everything's hunky dory. But then, like, what kind of substance comes from that? Like, you only grow from the things that put you out of your comfort zone, that force you to grow, little arguments that help you to refine your skills, your communication skills as a couple better. So yeah, man, like that is a tough That is a tough thing to keep in mind mid-fight. Like, it's easy to say that now, but I'll admit that mid-fight,
Yeah,
you're like, I don't know.
this is no fun. Yeah. When, as you're speaking, I'm reminded of this analogy. I saw it on one of those like goal cast things that
Yeah.
come up on your Facebook feed or whatever. It was a rabbi talking about a lobster. And in order for the lobster to grow, he
Uh-huh.
has to get like uncomfortable in his shell
Mm.
and then like shed the old shell or some, it was some sort of analogy like that. But
Yeah.
essentially it was like the growth comes from being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said like in marriage we're growing together. I met my husband when I was 23. I'm a completely different person than I
Oh,
was
yeah.
when I was 23. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, we would hope that we get married and we're going to be together 30, 40, 50 years. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to be a different person through all that, but the only way you're going to actually grow is if you kind of work through all the uncomfortable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's good.
What do you think is like the most common struggle that women that you talk to are dealing with when it comes to their marriage? What is like the common thing that just constantly keeps coming up?
um I think uh, the ones that I talk to, kind of who I resonate with,
Mm-hmm.
are women who their husbands are, they struggle with their husbands. So they're like, you know what I
I
mean?
like how you're trying to say this very nicely.
Because it's like, you see some couples and you're like, oh my gosh, your husband's like seems so nice and he's like the
Mm-hmm.
nicest guy. And yeah, no, it's not that. The ones that like talk to me and that who like we resonate with it, their husbands are cranky.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, they don't have this overall like nice guy thing. And so wife feels like it's his fault
Mm-hmm.
because you know what I mean? And like that's her immediate thought. And it's like, oh honey, you married him
Right.
for a reason. Like he fathered your children. You
Yeah.
love his as a dad, like he's a great father. He's got all these things. You married him for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to like get over the fact that yeah, okay, sometimes he's cranky or sometimes he's a little more antisocial than some other, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so that I think is the so I guess my point is that because of that, the women that I find, they think it's their husband's fault and they want to change their husband.
Mm-hmm.
When and I believe that this principle applies to anybody. Doesn't matter who your husband is.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that like unless you're married to Jesus, which you're not, right?
Right.
Like that you should really, and even if you were, if you, what would the issues be? They would be all your fault.
Yeah.
So it's like, so which is where I come back to that place of taking accountability for the things that we do. And that's kind of like that's what I talk about on the podcast and every other episode. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different place, a different way that we could take accountability. That's what the grace fueled wife even means, because it's like learning to be fueled with grace, learning to speak to your husband with grace, learning to have patience for him, even though he may not deserve it. He may
Mm-hmm.
be wrong. He may be, and that was a lesson that I learned through my separation. It
Mm-hmm.
was having God step in
Mm-hmm.
and surrendering, have him healing my marriage by saying, okay, I need you to fill me with grace. I need you to make me want to forgive him. I need
Mm-hmm.
you to make me not want to kill him because right now I like physically want to hurt him.
Yeah.
And it was not something that I was able to do in my own strength. It was
Right.
something that I had to sit down and surrender and say, okay, God, I need you in this place. And I think now it's almost like since then, or since this whole thing like even started, it's like I feel like God now just sends me women who are in a very similar place
Mm-hmm.
of just needing to kind of throw it up and surrender and be like, teach me,
Mm-hmm.
because teach me, God, teach me how to have grace for him and compassion and empathy, and teach me how to communicate with him better. But
Mm-hmm.
like take away all these like feelings of anger and aggression and whatever that I feel entitled to have
Mm-hmm.
because he's done all these things,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe he hasn't done all these things but I perceive that he has. And so that's kind of like I would
Yeah.
say the thread, the common thread.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of women, especially if they are um more extroverted or have more dominant personalities than their husbands, I feel like, and this is just an assumption, so I might be completely off base, but I feel like they have a tendency to struggle with that idea of grace towards their husband, because it makes them feel less than, or like somehow weak, or like at fault or whatever. So I'm trying to, or my internal struggle when I'm thinking about this is like, how would you then explain to her like what the benefit is of a different perspective, or the perspective that that you're granting them, to not see it as like, oh, like I'm just going to let my husband walk all over me. Because I think that sometimes women get confused with like the difference between a partnership and some sort of like he's dominant, I'm dominant, like sort of relationship. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I love that question, because someone had asked me when we separated, like, so what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know. And at the time, all I could think of, we're two type A personalities. Like, we're two
Mm-hmm.
alpha personalities
Mm-hmm.
that were clashing. So I'm definitely that kind of person who's more of an extrovert, more dominant. I was raised to be like, you make your own money. You don't need a man for blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, you do all these things. And there was a time during that where I was like, I don't need him. I don't need him. I make my own money. And I just felt a certain kind of way about myself. I felt good about myself, but it was almost to my own detriment. And I would say with that, and this was something my mom had taught me, who was the one who also taught me to be very dominant, very whatever. Who taught me that in stepping into humility and taking on some humility in that place, and understanding, it's almost like everyone I know hates the scripture in the Bible that says like, women submit to your husbands, and they think it's like, it doesn't mean that we're to be a doormat.
Right.
And my mom was she kind of, when she explained it to me, she was like, what it says is that men love your wives the way Jesus loved the church, and he laid down his life for the church. Right. So she was like, if he did that for you, it would be easy. You'd be like, anything you want, right? If he loved you that way, you'd be like, whatever you want, babe. You want dinner, you want this, sure, because he would be giving you everything you want. But sometimes he doesn't. And so it's kind of like the reason why it's a command in the Bible, not like a suggestion, is because we're supposed to do it. And it's not just us. He's supposed to love us even when we're being nasty to him. And we're supposed to kind of show him the respect, or my pastor's, I love the way she puts it. She says that women want to be cherished and men want to be championed. And it's like, oh, I love that, because it kind of takes away the stigma of like, respect and submit. Essentially, it means the same thing, but it's just, it kind of puts it in a place, in a perspective that we can talk about it a little better. And so I would say the benefit, to go back to your original question, is that if we can do that, if we can humble ourselves enough to champion him, to be his champion, even when we're not feeling cherished, then it's going to reverse the cycle. So one of my favorite marriage books is Love and Respect, and it's by Egrich, is his last name. Forgive me for blanking on the name right now. But the name of the book is Love and Respect. And what he talks about is cycles that we go through. So we go through crazy cycles. And I'm sure every married woman, like, I say crazy cycle, they're like, oh yeah, I know that one. I was on it last week, or I'm in it now.
Yeah.
But he also talks about like rewarding cycles. And so what it does is when you do that thing, when you're kind to your husband, and when you're showing him grace, and when you're showing him love, and you're showing him whatever, even when you think he doesn't deserve it, it stops that cycle. And it starts to spin it the other way. And it doesn't happen right away. But so the benefit is, like, when you're in a cycle, one of you has to stop. You can't just keep the blame, the blame game. It's your fault. It's your fault. Like, you're never going to get out of it. Right. So if one of you, it's like saying, I don't want to apologize first. So if one of you apologizes, right, you kind of like, you stop the cycle, and then you can start to turn it around the other way. So I would say that's the number one benefit of doing this. And it doesn't mean that you're not worthy, that you're not important, that you're not valued. If anything, it shows your strength, because by showing your humility, you're showing like, I don't need to like puff up my chest to be important. Right? Like God didn't need to puff up his chest like to be important. He was God. So he humbled himself as a servant, and that's what he calls us to do. And so wives or no wives, this is what he calls us to do in life. And so if we follow that example, that's what we're doing. That's the benefit of it. We're becoming more Christ-like. We're saying, okay, I don't need to be so important right now. And in that, that's where God can go, okay, now that you've made yourself a little bit less important, let me do the work for you.
Ah, gosh, that was so good. I really like what you said about being champions of our husband. That's such a good perspective, and something that I feel like I always love those tangible things that you can just, that are short, that you can hang on to and remind yourself like, okay, especially when you're in the moment, when you're in the thick of it, those are so good. Okay, last question that I wanted to talk about, because like you mentioned, we are in the middle of this quarantine. If you're listening to this later on, you've come out on the other side, and hopefully you guys are better for it. But right now, like you said, we're all kind of, I mean, there's a lot of stress going on, you know, outwardly. There's a lot of things. We're consuming so much media right now, so we're seeing a lot of extra stuff than we normally would. We're dealing with more stress than we normally would, and in a different situation than we would normally be in. What is your, if you have one, what is your like number one survival marriage tip for couples that are currently in quarantine, or, you know, have been in this COVID atmosphere for a while?
That's a really good question, because it was one of those like, how are we surviving?
Yeah.
Right. And I did an episode on thriving and not surviving, and it was like great. And then, you know, 2 weeks later we were in another fight. But like,
right.
You know, but after having all of that, after having come through a transformative conversations with my husband, I would say that taking that time to spend together to connect, it sounds stupid because we're stuck in the house together. And I think I talked about this yesterday. Like, we're together. What more do we need? But it's like, we're together, but are we really taking time to really connect? Or are we just at the end of the day being like, oh my God, thank God the kids are asleep.
Yeah.
Let's just watch
It's
a
like
movie.
it's like a different together. It's like an intentional together that you're talking about.
Yeah, almost like, and so I had talked about this, like, it's almost like, and you had talked about this yesterday, dating your spouse, right? And it's like, well, can you have a date night at home? And I think, you know, how many awesome things happen in date night when we sit and we're having time and we're intentional and we're speaking together. And so one of the things that we were doing in the beginning of quarantine, and we stopped, and I think that's where some of the problems came in, and so we started again, was dating each other at home. Because we're stuck at home, and whatever that means for you. So for us, it was like, okay, it's Saturday night, I'm gonna make some cocktails, let's listen to music, let's hang out, but let's have some real together time so we can talk. So I would say that the number one thing to get yourself through quarantine, and if you're listening to this later and you got through quarantine, to get yourself through life, is continue to date each other. And if it means being stuck at home, have date night at home, even when the kids are in bed.
I completely agree. And it's one of those things that it's like, if you want to tone up your body, or you want to lose weight, or just feel better, and you like, so you're like, I'm going to work out. And then you start seeing results because you're working out every day. And then you like what you see and you like how you feel. And then you're like, oh, well, I feel great. Everything's great. I look great. So I'm just going to stop now. Like, I got where I want. I'm just going to stop now. Okay, then like, what happens? Like, it doesn't just automatically stay, like, you don't automatically stay, you know, toned and whatever. Like, no, you get the flabby arms and all that after that because you stopped doing it. So like, just with anything that we want to continue to, you know, see the results from or reap the benefits from, then we have to continue doing that same habit. And continue dating each other, because it's like you said, and like we talked about yesterday, and we keep referring to this yesterday thing, you guys, I recorded an episode for Beatrice for her podcast, and it was hopefully good. But anyways, so yeah, like just when you get in life and all the mess and all the kid things and all this and that, like you tend to connect throughout the day as a couple, but it's like here and there, and it's like, what do you got doing? Okay, you're going to go there, I'm going to pick up this kid, and blah, blah, blah. And that's not connecting. That's not what you guys as a couple need to keep that flame. We got to keep that flame going.
I love that analogy because it is the story of my life. It's like
Yeah.
you lose 30 pounds and you look amazing, and you're like, yeah, I can have some chocolate cake now. And it's like, yeah, once,
Right.
honey, like,
Don't get crazy. Yeah. Like,
don't get crazy. And then, or if you do, it's like, don't be mad that you're in your fat clothes again, or
yeah.
whatever. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you should know better. So I love that analogy because it is so true.
Yeah.
You can have a great marriage and then it kind of goes south for a little bit, but as long as you don't let it go too far. I mean, that was the other thing, right? As long as you don't let it go too far, it's not going to take that long to get it back. It's not like, as we age, losing 10 pounds all of a sudden becomes so much harder than it was before. It's like, no, in marriage, it actually becomes easier to get back because you start to catch it earlier. You start to catch it before you get too far gone. So,
especially when you learn these tips and habits that, like you're implementing in your podcast and you're teaching your friends and your listeners, like as you pick up all these like tips and hacks, then like you can apply things easier, faster, and more frequently, to where it's like, oh, okay, like I know what I'm doing now. So we got off track. Okay, I know exactly what we need to do to get back on track. Like, let's do that and start, keep going. Awesome. I am so excited to have you on. I love all the things that you have shared, such like good takeaways that you brought today. So where can everybody find you? Where can they connect with you? Especially, like I said, you are focused in, dialed in on speaking on primarily just marriage stuff, which is, oh my gosh, like we need a whole lot of help in that area. So if my listeners want to seek you out for that kind of content, where can they find you?
Sure. So the podcast is called The Grace Fueled Wife. So they can find that wherever you find podcasts, Apple, iTunes, wherever. There is a Facebook group, and that's just a Facebook Grace Fueled Wife community, or the website. If you go to thegracefueledwife.com, or on Instagram, also at The Grace Fueled Wife. You can hit me up, send me a DM, any of those places, and that's where I hang out. So.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey fam, hope you found something juicy and a good takeaway that you can apply to your life right now, because that is what I'm all about. So I hope you got something. If you did, share it with me so I know that this is helping you. Also, because I want to celebrate with you and I want to encourage you and empower you in your journey to utilize some of these things that you learn on the podcast. Yes, that is a baby in the background. Also, don't forget to subscribe and share out this podcast with your other mom friends so they can get these nuggets, these wisdom and words of truth. And do not sleep on these strategy sessions with me, guys, because this is only going to be like tiny bit that I'm offering. And so first come, first serve. Again, hop in my email address, theashcarol@gmail.com, if you want to work with me, and we can bust through these limiting beliefs right now and get you on and feeling truly like the Wonder Woman that you are, girl. So anyways, I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I will catch you next time.